In late 1951, Eby became ill. Medical personnel had been unable to determine the cause of Eby's illness and had no background from which to draw. Eby's system was chlorophyll-based, and he processed food and energy much the same as plants. Waste material was excreted almost exactly the same as plants. It was decided that an expert in botany was called for. A botanist, Dr. Guillermo Mendoza, was brought in to try and help him recover. Those of you who have been looking for him on medical lists will not find him there. He was a PhD in botany. Dr. Mendoza worked to save Eby until mid-1952 when Eby died. Dr. Mendoza eventually, according to the information that I read, became the expert on at least this type alien biology. In a futile attempt to save Eby and to try and gain favor with this technological superior alien race, the United States began broadcasting a call for help early in 1952 into the vast regions of space. If you know they're better than you, and if you know they can lick you, you better try and be friends with them, and that's what this effort was all about. The call went unanswered, but the project continued as an effort of good faith.
In 1948, there was something called a Blue Force. The USA military removed all the UFOs. The extraterrestrial biological entity was found, and it had trouble eliminating waste. They eliminate waste through their pores, so it was sick and it died.
Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. The wreckage of an alien craft is recovered by the IPU, along with the bodies of 3 extraterrestrials and 1 lone survivor. But the greatest shock came in the lower depths of the base.
And then the colonel said, what we've got in here is we're interviewing a gray alien.
I have heard that there were live aliens kept alive for a certain period of time, maybe years after Roswell, let's say. Now, they would certainly have done all kinds of testing on them.
One of the officers on scene is a battle-tested hero of World War II, a fighter pilot whose reputation earns him the nickname Black Mac. But nothing would prepare Marion Magruder and his classmates for what they would witness at Wright Field. It would change their lives forever.
He saw metal that was very pliable, that you could wrinkle up in your hands, and then it would go right back into shape, and it was very light, and yet you couldn't tear it apart. He saw parts of wreckage of what were extraterrestrial craft. He saw bodies, and he also saw a living being. He said that it was childlike, very thin with an oversized head and long arms with 4 digits. My father referred to the fact that we killed it. I'm sure we did not do it on purpose, but they were experimenting, and obviously we did not know how to make this entity live. But this being did die. And the way he referred to it is, we killed him.
Why do they keep the aliens in a Faraday-shielded environment? Because they have a tendency to disappear right through walls. And if you can prevent the transmission of electromagnetic energy, you can stop them from doing it.
People that claim these abduction experiences say that little grey entities enter their room in the middle of the night and they see them pass through the walls.
As early as 1957, Professor Hans Eysenck, then chairman of the psychology department at the University of London, wrote a letter insinuating that there was a gigantic conspiracy involving some 30 major universities all over the world and hundreds of highly respected scientists to silence the truth about what we knew about the powers of human consciousness. After the United States Congress had access to the data from the Stanford Research Institute and from universities all over the country and all over the world, they were terrified of what would happen if we all developed the powers of our minds. It was clear that we could remote view
I developed what I call the synchronized universe model as a way of trying to expand current physics to account for a lot of these psychic phenomena, paranormal phenomena. Besides the types of things we've been talking about, which involve communication psychically and affecting things at a distance, you also have other abilities that the yogis have demonstrated, that certain adepts in China, the Qigong masters, have demonstrated, things like walking through walls, levitation, teleportation, things that in the West we laugh at and we call them science fiction.
We could see into the future and into the past. We could find, missing airplanes and anything you can imagine with our minds. And they actually did a smear campaign with the media to discredit what they had discovered.
Many abductees are given certain other kind of communications. You are special. You are chosen. You're the golden child. You have a mission. Very often, they have teaching or testing sessions with abductees, from childhood through adulthood. Sometimes, and I have this many, many times reported very specifically, and sometimes in more than one generation in the family, they taught me how to walk through walls. They taught me how to pass through solid objects. They taught me how to use my mind to move objects. They taught me how to affect electrical impulses with my brain. They taught me telekinesis. They taught me levitation. Now, the people are able to perform these things when they're with the aliens, but when they get up the next morning and try to walk through that wall, it doesn't happen. All right? So it seems to only work when you're with the aliens, but they're spending years sometimes teaching people how to pass through solid objects.
In medieval Britain, Dr. John Dee was consulted regularly by Queen Elizabeth I. At the British Museum in London, we see the dark mirror which John Dee used to see or scry the faces of spirits. Dee's ability to communicate with spirits led him to be employed as a spy, developing psychic espionage techniques, which we now call remote viewing. John Dee attended Trinity College in Cambridge, which became a place where occultists and the world of spies were intertwined. Aleister Crowley also attended Trinity College.
One of the driving forces behind this movement, the Illuminati, is the satanic cult movement in this country today. So I began my little journey forward. And one of the matters that I developed information about was an individual I learned about was Aleister Crowley. He likes to have his name pronounced Crowley to rhyme with holy. And the Satanists today and for the number of years in the past, have basically used his philosophy and his writings as a guide.
He had so many Masonic degrees that you could fill up 5 pages of a book with them. This guy was probably the most highly honored Mason in the world. He styled himself the wickedest man in the world. He believed himself to be the great beast, and he changed his name to Aleister Crowley, so it would add up in both English, Hebrew, and Greek Kabbalah as 666. In 1904, Crowley had a communication with an extraterrestrial being named Iwas. And this being, through his wife, kind of a channeling type operation, brought forth a book that was called the Book of the Law in 1904. And this book declared that the slain and risen God, i.e. Jesus, had stepped off the throne, and that a new God, the crowned and conquering child, was taking his place. As a result of this, Crowley proclaimed the end of Christianity and the start of Crowleyanity. Crowley taught that the way you could live forever was by vampirizing little children sexually. And he personally bragged of having slaughtered 150 male children in 1 year. This is why he was called the wickedest man in the world.
And now listen to this sentence, folks, closely. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable system. We're talking about human sacrifices.
And they'd also drug them up, and they'd take a sacrificial knife and they'd start from the chest and move all the way down to your abdomen. And then that's how they sacrificed, and they'd collect the blood and they'd drink it. When the mid-September through mid-November, they sacrificed babies, and nothing but babies, because they need the pure blood of the untainted children. And I didn't understand what it was like. I just can't believe I'm seeing this every year of my life. I've experienced that, and that was the hardest part for me. It's like hearing those babies literally scream and cry, and then seeing their blood flow.
The little boy was taken to a basement. He was crucified alive. First he was skinned.
President Truman created the super-secret National Security Agency by secret executive order on November 4th, 1952, and until recent years, there wasn't 1 in 50,000 people in the United States who even knew it existed. Its primary purpose was to decipher the alien communications and language and establish a dialogue with the aliens. This most urgent task was a continuation of the earlier effort and was codenamed Sigma. The secondary purpose of the NSA was to monitor all communications and emissions from any and all devices worldwide for the purpose of gathering intelligence, both human and alien, and to contain the secret of the alien presence. Project Sigma, ladies and gentlemen, was extremely successful. The NSA also maintains communications with the Luna base and other secret space programs. By executive order, the NSA is exempt from all laws which do not specifically name the NSA in the text of the law as being subject to that law. How many of you know what that means? That means we have a completely lawless organization running around the country doing whatever they want to do, answering to no one, and under no law which does not name the National Security Agency in the text of that law as specifically being subject to that law by executive order of the President of the United States. That means that if the agency is not spelled out in the text of any and every law passed by the Congress, it is not subject to that or those laws. The NSA now performs many other duties and in fact is the premier agency within the intelligence community. Today, the NSA receives 75% of the monies allotted to the intelligence community. And the old sayings, ladies and gentlemen, where the money goes, therein the power resides, is absolutely true. The DCI today is mainly a figurehead. He is in charge of the CIA. The CIA does have many functions which are useful to this country and some which are deadly to us. The DCI, of course, is in charge of that agency. But he is not, as everyone thinks, the head of the intelligence community. That position really and truthfully lies with the director of the National Security Agency. The primary task of the NSA is still alien communications, but now includes other alien projects as well. President Truman had been keeping our allies, including the Soviet Union, informed of the developing alien problem since the Roswell recovery. This had been done in case the aliens turned out to be a threat to the human race and thus the world. Plans were formulated to defend the Earth in case of invasion. These were international plans, which included most of the countries of the world. Great difficulty, however, was encountered in maintaining international secrecy. It was decided that an outside group was necessary to coordinate and control international efforts in order to hide the secret from the normal scrutiny of governments by the press. The result was the formation of a secret society which became known as the Bilderbergers. The headquarters of this group is in Geneva, Switzerland. The Bilderbergers evolved into a secret world government that now controls everything. The United Nations was then, and is now, an international joke.
Today is May 29th, 2014. I'm Jake Morphonios, and this is the End Times News Report. So what's going on in the world today? Well, big news out of Copenhagen, where the Bilderbergers are meeting to discuss global domination. Well, let's introduce you to this. If you are not familiar with the Bilderberg Group and what they do, I hope that you'll take a few minutes, enjoy this video, and learn something about the world around you. This is going to be a red pill for many of you. It's going to wake you up. It's going to show you something that you probably have not considered before. It's going to show you what kind of power structure exists in the world around us and who the true power players are. I'm talking about the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs. As insane as it might sound, these people are members of very old secret societies, such as the Freemasons and the Illuminati, as well as offshoot groups like the Skull and Bonesmen, the Bohemians, the Bohemian Club, which meets each year to perform mock human sacrifices to the ancient pagan god Molech while dressed in old druidic black robes.
I want to remind people of a quote made at a Bilderberg conference in 1991 by David Rockefeller, or Rockenfelder, his true name. He's a humanist, CFR kingpin, founder of the Trilateral Commission. He's a New World Order godfather, and he said this: "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time magazines, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during these years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward world government. the supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. These people think that they're doing something good for us.
In 1953, a new president occupied the White House. He was a man used to a structured staff organization with a chain of command. His method was to delegate authority and rule by committee. He made major decisions, but only when his advisors were unable to come to consensus, and when he was in the Army, he was known as the diplomat. He was very good at what he did. He was very good at bringing people together, reaching consensus, and getting people to work for him. His normal method was to read through or listen to several alternatives and then approve one. Those who worked closely with him have stated that his favorite comment was, "Just do whatever it takes." Now here's a man very different from President Truman. He spent a lot of time on the golf course. This was not all unusual for a man who had been career Army with the ultimate position of Supreme Allied Commander during the war, a post which carried 5 stars along with it. In fact, he deserved it. This president was General of the Army Dwight David Eisenhower. During his first year in office, 1953, at least 10 more crash disks were recovered, along with 26 dead and 4 live aliens. One of the 4 live aliens died within hours of being removed from the craft. The others died approximately 3 or 4 days later. Of the 10, 4 were found in Arizona, 2 in Texas, 1 in New Mexico, 1 in Louisiana, 1 in Montana, and 1 in South Africa. And there were hundreds of sightings. Why were so many craft crashing? Because the government was scared. And when they found out that the radar was downing the craft, they started aiming the radar at the craft with lock-on radar and pumped the juice through. And they brought as many down as they could.
The crash site's about 12.5 miles from the downtown of Aztec, New Mexico. This is, I think the date on that is 1952. It's the clearest one I have. You can see Gonzales, the Alvado, Moriarty, and of course Kirkland. And then a radar site they called Roswell. It wasn't really in Roswell. Ironically, it was in the town of Corona. Going back when we got these all declassified, we realized we had a problem. The Air Force didn't take over these bases until 1950. Well, if Aztec happened in 1948, that wouldn't work well with the timeline. So we did some more digging, and we found out that they were operated by the Atomic Energy Commission. And that's the cover of the historical report. Their main object in life was to protect Kirkland, of course, Los Alamos, and Sandia National Labs, all part of the air defense at that time, plus the Manhattan Project. Bill Steinman came up with a theory after interviewing people that these bases, if they could ever find them, had some very high powerful radar, experimental radar. Well, it turns out the one in Alvado, the original Los Alamos base, was experimenting with some extremely powerful radar. Some people refer to it as lash up. That's not really a correct word for it. It was, I call it early lash up, but it was a very powerful microwave radar, like all radar is a microwave. It's interesting, there was a manual in there, and part of that manual warns the operators of this new powerful radar. Now keep in mind that was restricted airspace back then. But before you run the new lash-up radar, make sure with your height finders and range finders there are no aircraft in the area, or serious damage or death could occur. It would be like the old radar ranges where you put an aluminum foil plate in it. Bill Steinman's theory did prove true because of the warning that we found in there.
The military have secret systems based on a laser that can bring down UFOs. There are 8 around the world that he knew of, 2 in the UK, 1 in Germany and a few in the US. It disables or interferes with the propulsion of the UFO and causes them to come down. He claimed there is a UFO tracking facility in the military land at Sennybridge. It is stored under the ground and comes up at night. It consists of a large aerial, quite wide, about 50 to 60 meters high. It can be seen from the public road at night above the trees. There is also a radar dish that rotates, and it too only comes up at night. It is about the size of a car. The aerial is used somehow to track the UFOs. He believes there are more facilities like this elsewhere in the world.
Eisenhower knew that he had to wrestle and beat the alien problem. He knew that he could not do it by revealing the secret to the Congress, because in fact isn't that the same as telling the public? Early in 1953, the new president turned to his friend and fellow member of the Council on Foreign Relations, Nelson Rockefeller, for help with the alien problem. Eisenhower and Rockefeller began planning the secret structure of alien task supervision, which was to become a reality within 1 year. The idea for MJ-12 was thus born. It was Nelson's uncle Winthrop Aldrich who had been crucial in convincing Eisenhower to even run for president. The whole Rockefeller family, and with them the Rockefeller empire, had solidly backed Eisenhower. Asking Rockefeller for help with the alien problem was to be the biggest mistake Eisenhower ever made for the future of the United States and most probably all of humanity, as you will soon see. What he literally did with this act, ladies and gentlemen, is abdicate the presidency to a secret group. Within 1 week of Eisenhower's election, he had appointed Nelson Rockefeller chairman of a presidential advisory committee on government organization. Rockefeller was responsible for planning the reorganization of the government. New Deal programs went into one single cabinet position called the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. When the Congress approved the new cabinet position in April of 1953, Nelson was named to the post of Undersecretary to Ovida Culp Hobby. In 1953, also, astronomers discovered large objects in space which were moving toward the Earth, and it was first believed that they were asteroids. However, if you know much about astronomy, you know that you can predict or project backward orbital paths of bodies in space and determine where they come from, what they're doing, where they're going, and what their orbital path really is. Well, this failed to pan out, and the evidence proved that the objects could only be spaceships intelligently guided. Project Sigma intercepted alien communications, and when the objects reached the Earth, they took up a very high orbit around the equator. There were several huge ships, and their actual intent was unknown. NSC 10/1 and 2 were interpreted to mean that no one at the top wanted to know about anything until it was over and successful. These actions established a buffer between the president and the information, and it's important that you understand this because it's important later. It was intended that this buffer serve as a means for the president to deny knowledge if leaks divulged the true state of affairs. That is to prevent the collapse of the government. If the president can stand up and say, I didn't know about it, the government can survive. If the president cannot say that, then you have a very, very dangerous situation indeed. The buffer was used in later years for the purpose of effectively isolating succeeding presidents from any knowledge of the alien presence other than what the secret government and the intelligence community wanted them to know.
On the dark side of the moon, the secret face of our satellite planet, which only a few men in living history have ever seen, there lies a star-shaped crater called Parsons Crater, named after the rocket scientist John Parsons. John Parsons is known by several names. He was born under the name Marvel Whiteside Parsons, and soon became involved in the occult. Jack Parsons developed and patented several liquid and solid fuel rocket engines. His patented designs are still being used to this day on intercontinental ballistic missiles such as Polaris and the Space Shuttle. The Polaris nuclear missiles use Parsons rocket technology, which has a pentagram-shaped void impressed into the solid rocket fuel to aid faster burning. Jack Parsons revered the English Satanist Aleister Crowley, and eventually became the leader of one of Crowley's secret cults called the OTO. The OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientalis, claims descent from the Bavarian Illuminati, which had been revived by Adam Spartacus Weishaupt. Grand Master of the Priory de Sion, Jules Verne, had written several books which strongly influenced the mind of the young Jack Parsons.